listeners, welcome to another Whiskey Diaries. I'm your host Martin Lang, and today we're going to be talking about Redbreast. Redbreast is a single pot Irish whiskey. Now, Irish whiskey has a lot of misconceptions out there, so we're going to start with a couple of things just to define what Irish whiskey is, and after that we're going to go through a little bit of history of this absolutely stunning whiskey, probably some of the best Irish whiskey in the world. Now, Irish whiskey has five main categories. The five categories is they have a blended whiskey, they have a single grain, they have a grain whiskey, they have a single malt, and they have a single pot. Now, blended whiskey is like similar to Scotch blended whiskey, in which they use a grain whiskey mixed up with some malted barley whiskey. Now, you've got the single grain, that has to be one single grain, either full unmalted barley, maize, corn, whatever it is. Then you've got a blended grain, grain whiskey, that can be any type of grain, all blended together or not. Then you've got the single malt, that is exactly the same as whiskey, Scotch whiskey, which is basically one malted barley. And then you've got the single pot. Single pot is basically how whiskey, Irish whiskey, has been done for like 200, 300 years. It's a quintessential type of Irish whiskey. The reason why it's called single pot, besides the fact that they do use the pot, the casual onion-shaped pot still, they actually use a mix between malted barley and unmalted barley. So the reason why they do that, historically speaking, is because back in the 1800s, 1700s, when England was starting to tax Ireland on the whiskies, they were taxing only on the malted barley. So the Irish decided to start producing whiskey with a blend of unmalted and malted barley to avoid tax. Now, that's the definition of single pot, and usually is between a 70-30% ratio. You can't make a single pot Irish with like 10% of one grain and 80% the other grain, or so on and so on. Redbreast in itself has a very, very long history, so we're going to just touch on a few details here and there just to give you an idea where the name comes from and the sort of history that it has. In the 1800s, 1850s, there was a little shop similar to what Johnny Walker and Chivas Regal used to do. He's basically started in a shop that used to sell wine, and that wine and sherries used to be kept in casks. Once the wine was done, they started buying whiskey from different distilleries. This store in particular was called Gilbey's, and it started in 1851 and started in the UK, in London. After that, after a few years, they opened one in Dublin, and in Dublin they started buying whiskies to fill these barrels from all different Irish distilleries. Eventually, they started producing a version of Jameson's because the whiskey was coming from the Jameson's distilleries. And eventually, by the first mention of Redbreast was in 1912. And 1912 was called Redbreast because one of the chairmen of the Gilbey shop was actually a very fan of watching birds. And one of his favorite birds was the Redbreast, Redbreast robin. That is a very common bird in Europe that has a massive chest that is basically red. So that's where the name comes from. The whiskey in itself has won countless awards, especially by Jim Murray's considered the 21-year-old one of the best Irish whiskies in the world, and one of the best world's whiskies out there as well. I think it got number 2 in 2018 and so on. Redbreast 12-year-old actually just won in the International Whiskey Awards, Whiskey and Spirit Awards. Last year they won Best Whiskey in the World. Best international whiskey, let me put it that way, and it's absolutely stunning. It's literally basically this. If you think of an Irish pot still, single pot still, this is the whiskey. There's not many whiskies out there that are better than this. It's owned by Jameson's. And it's producing Midleton distillery, obviously, like Jameson it is. The 12-year-old is, as it says, 12 years old. It's aged in American oak, and it's a 40% ABV. I'm pretty sure the UK version of this is 43 or 45. Don't quote me on that, but I remember drinking it overseas, and I believe that they reduced the alcohol for the Australian market. So that's a 12-year-old. Then they do the 12-year-old. Sorry about that. The 12-year-old cask strength. Now the cask strength comes at 52.2%, 58.2%. It's a 12-year-olds as well, and they do different versions, obviously, because cask strengths being coming out of a single cask. So each version, when they run out, it will be different ABVs, but it's always assumed that it's going to be over 58%. It's actually stunning as well, and it's like, again, I just can't say anything bad about these whiskies. It's just like incredible. Now they do another version that is called the Lustau edition. It's a non-age statement on this one. I couldn't find online what the age statement was, what the actual age. I'm surely some of you can find it, or if you do, just put it on the comments. The Lustau edition is a sherry cask finish. Most of Redbreast is actually aged in American oak. This one is sherry from the Lustau region. We touched briefly on this whiskey previously on our Irish whiskies. You can watch it on the other videos. Then they do a 15-year-old. Again, 15-year-old completely in American oak. They, again, incredible. We're going to try this one. And then finally, they do a 21-year-old. The 21-year-old is the one that Jim Murray gave it one of the best whiskies in the world, and actually probably the best single pot Irish whiskies out there. It's incredible. We're gonna try the 15-year-old just to go through the tastings and everything. Again, this is 46% ABV, 100% aged in American oak. As always, a good smell before you taste it. Beautiful. You get toffee, you get vanilla, you get that softness from American oak and from being triple distilled. These whiskies are triple distilled. The common misconception as well is that all Irish whiskies triple distilled. That is not true. A lot of them are double distilled, the same way that some Scotch whiskies are actually triple distilled, like Auchentoshan, for instance. There we go. And yeah, there you got it. It's like that spiciness that you get from the unmalted barley and the mix with the malted barley actually creates a very unique taste that you can only recognize, and you will be able to recognize from any Redbreast. And it's just very, very single and very distinct. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. Slán Jabbar, and we'll see you next time.